Hi, automotive enthusiasts. Welcome to Octane Origins, where today we're diving into one of the most surprising legends in automotive history, the Toyota AE86. At first glance, this car looks like nothing more than a simple 1980s compact coupe, a practical and affordable machine meant for everyday commutes and grocery runs. But over the years, the AE86 transformed into something far greater, a symbol of skill, balance, and rebellion that left its fingerprints on motorsport, car culture, and even popular media worldwide. This isn't just a story about horsepower or lap times. It's about how a modest little Toyota carved out a legacy far beyond what its creators ever intended. In this video, we'll explore how the AE86 went from an underdog economy car to a drifting icon, and finally to a global cultural touchstone. We'll uncover the decisions that shaped it, the underground movements that elevated it, and the lasting impact that keeps it alive decades after production ended. Expect a journey that blends engineering quirks with human ambition and shows how a humble Corolla variant rose to inspire generations of enthusiasts. To understand why the AE86 matters, we need to look at the environment that birthed it. The early 1980s were a time of transition in the auto industry. Emissions rules were tightening, fuel efficiency was king, and many brands were abandoning the joy of lightweight rear-wheel drive cars in favor of front-wheel drive practicality. Toyota could have followed that trend entirely, but the AE86 was a deliberate holdout, a small pocket of resistance that carried the spirit of traditional driving fun into a new era. That decision alone gave it the DNA that made everything else possible. What makes this story compelling is not just what Toyota built, but what people did with it. On winding mountain passes, grassroots racers began to realize that the AE86's balance and responsiveness allowed it to dance through corners with unmatched confidence. At the same time, an animated series projected the car onto the world stage, making it a star far beyond Japan's borders. Over time, its legend spread through underground racing circles, professional drift competitions, video games, and eventually collector markets that would push prices to staggering levels. By the end of this journey, you'll see how the AE86 became far more than a nostalgic 1980s throwback. It became a metaphor for ingenuity over raw power, for the idea that with the right hands and the right spirit, even a humble machine can reach greatness. Today we'll break down its rise, its cultural explosion, and its enduring influence on modern performance cars. So buckle in, because the story of the AE86 is about to show us how legends are made where we least expect them. In the early 1980s, Toyota was in a position many automakers faced: how to balance practicality with the heritage of fun-to-drive cars that enthusiasts cherished. The Corolla line was already known as reliable, efficient, and sensible, but Toyota engineers saw an opportunity to craft a version that carried the joy of rear-wheel drive into a market that was rapidly shifting toward front-wheel drive platforms. That car would become the AE86, offered in both coupe and hatchback forms, with modest horsepower but exceptional balance. It was not designed to be a headline grabber. It was designed to deliver accessible performance to everyday drivers. The very fact that Toyota kept it rear-wheel drive when so many others were moving on created the foundation for its future legend. Micro story. A young driver in Japan might have looked at the AE86 as a sensible first car. Affordable to purchase, easy to maintain, and modestly powered, it offered none of the intimidation of big, expensive sports cars. Yet, as soon as that driver discovered the way the chassis rotated into corners and the high-revving 4AGE engine came alive above 5,000 RPM, the car revealed a second personality. It was as if Toyota had built an economy car with a hidden secret. It wanted to be driven hard. It wanted to play. That duality, practicality by day, joy by night, made it a gateway to car enthusiasm for countless people. Micro story. In motorsports, the AE86 quickly proved it was not to be underestimated. In touring car racing and local club events, this unassuming Corolla went wheel to wheel with bigger, more powerful rivals. Its lightweight design allowed it to brake later, carry speed through corners, and punish cars that relied only on straight-line grunt. Watching an AE86 overtake cars that cost twice as much was an unforgettable sight, one that captured the imagination of spectators who began to see it not as an underdog, but as a giant slayer. Its victories were not about dominance in numbers, but about showing that clever engineering and driver skill could rewrite expectations. Context digest. The AE86's technical setup deserves a moment of attention. At its core was the 1.6-liter 4AGE engine, co-developed with Yamaha, featuring dual overhead cams and fuel injection at a time when carburetors were still common. It wasn't about brute force. It produced around 128 horsepower, but in a car weighing under 2,300 pounds, that was enough to feel lively. Add to that a limited slip differential and performance trims, and a suspension geometry tuned for responsiveness, and you had a platform that could punch well above its weight. It was proof that driving pleasure was about more than horsepower figures. It was about balance. Microstory. The AE86 began to shine on Japan's mountain passes, or Touge roads, where drivers tested their skill on tight, twisting routes after dark. Here, power was less important than rhythm, weight transfer, and precision. The AE86 became the perfect companion, allowing drivers to push limits in a car that forgave mistakes but rewarded mastery. For many, it became more than transportation. It was a teacher, a car that shaped their driving philosophy. Stories spread among enthusiasts of how the AE86 seemed alive under pressure, eager to dance through corners in a way that connected man and machine like few cars could. Reflection bridge. What started as a modest Corolla derivative was already becoming a proving ground for young drivers and grassroots racers, setting the stage for a cultural leap. Context digest. The broader auto industry was largely turning away from rear-wheel drive in compact cars. Manufacturers favored front-wheel drive for packaging efficiency, cost, and safety. That made the AE86 something of a last stand, a car that defied the tide. This rarity would become part of its appeal because it represented a link to an earlier era when driver engagement mattered more than practicality alone. For enthusiasts, owning an AE86 was like holding onto a piece of endangered automotive DNA. Microstory. By the mid-1980s, the AE86 had already attracted attention in rallying. On gravel and tarmac stages, its lightweight nature and nimble handling allowed it to take on conditions that humbled larger cars. In some regions, it became a favored choice for privateers who wanted something reliable, affordable, and competitive. These appearances in motorsport added another layer to its growing reputation, showing that this wasn't just a fun commuter car, but a machine capable of serious performance when pushed. Reflection bridge. Yet the AE86's reputation was not destined to remain limited to racing circuits or local legends. It was about to find a place in a rising underground culture. Context digest. Japan in the late 1980s and 1990s was experiencing a surge in car enthusiasm, fueled by strong domestic production and the availability of tunable, affordable cars. Street scenes, tuning shops, and mountain pass battles were as much social gatherings as driving challenges. The AE86 fit perfectly into this world, offering a car that was inexpensive, widely available, and endlessly modifiable. It was in this environment that drifting began to emerge, not as reckless chaos, but as a highly skilled art form emphasizing car control and style. Microstory. The AE86 became the canvas on which this art form was painted. Drivers discovered that with the right suspension tweaks and tire choices, the car could be coaxed into graceful slides, controlled by throttle and steering with uncanny predictability. Spectators and fellow drivers admired how it carried momentum and seemed to pivot around corners like a dancer on stage. The sight of an AE86 carving through a mountain road sideways, headlights glowing in the dark, became iconic. The car wasn't just participating in drifting, it was defining the look and feel of the sport in its infancy. Microstory. Word of the AE86's drifting prowess spread quickly through local magazines, VHS tapes, and eventually international coverage. It became the poster child for a scene that valued skill over horsepower, creativity over conformity. For young enthusiasts worldwide, the AE86 symbolized an attainable dream. You didn't need supercar money to experience something special, just dedication, practice, and a car that spoke your language. The legend was growing, but it was about to be amplified by something no one expected: popular media that would transform it from cult hero to global icon. And just as the AE86 was becoming a darling of the drift scene, an animated story would launch it into a different kind of stardom, setting the stage for its cultural explosion. The mid-1990s brought a turning point that would cement the AE86's place in history, not through racing statistics or engineering breakthroughs, but through storytelling. In Japan, a manga and later anime series captured the imagination of millions by focusing on a young driver delivering tofu in his father's AE86 down treacherous mountain roads. The series presented the car not as a flashy exotic, but as a humble tool of mastery, a vehicle whose limitations demanded skill, precision, and creativity. This narrative resonated deeply, especially with young enthusiasts who saw in the AE86 a reflection of themselves. Ordinary people capable of extraordinary things when paired with the right machine. Microstory. Fans who grew up watching the anime began seeking out AE86, transforming demand for what had been a used economy car into a cultural obsession. Import lots that once ignored the aging Corolla suddenly found buyers willing to pay premiums. In Japan, drifting clubs began to swell with members eager to emulate the sideways driving style they had watched on screen. Even in countries thousands of miles away, enthusiasts unfamiliar with Japanese mountain roads were captivated by the car's portrayal, leading to a global cult following. The AE86 was no longer just a car. It was a symbol of aspiration. Context Digest. The timing of this cultural wave coincided with a golden age of car video games and globalized media. Titles like Gran Turismo and other racing franchises prominently featured the AE86, introducing it to players worldwide. For many who would never set foot in Japan, the virtual AE86 became their first exposure to drifting, lightweight sports cars and Japanese car culture. This cross-pollination between media and real life reinforced the car's myth, making it accessible not just to drivers, but to gamers, collectors, and dreamers alike. Microstory. In the United States, the AE86 developed a second life as part of the import tuner movement of the late 1990s and early 2000s. With the rise of dedicated drift competitions like Formula Drift, drivers looked for cars that balanced affordability with controllability. Although rarer in the US than in Japan, the AE86's reputation preceded it, and those who managed to acquire one were treated with a level of respect that far outweighed the car's modest specs. Crowds cheered when the small Toyota lined up against more powerful machines, proving time and again that style and finesse mattered just as much as raw numbers. Reflection Bridge. The AE86 was now firmly planted in the global consciousness, no longer confined to Japan's mountains or underground scenes. Context Digest. The aftermarket responded to this explosion of interest. Companies developed suspension kits, engine swaps, body parts, and restoration tools to keep AE86s alive and competitive. Tuning culture embraced the car as a blank canvas, with some owners preserving period-correct builds while others transformed them into fire-breathing track weapons. The diversity of approaches only reinforced the car's versatility. Whether lightly modified for weekend drives or extensively rebuilt for competition, the AE86 seemed to welcome every kind of enthusiast. Microstory. At professional drift events, seeing an AE86 go head-to-head with newer machines became an emotional moment for fans. Its underdog status was part of its charm, but when piloted by skilled drivers, it still managed to claim victories against rivals with double or triple the power. The crowd reaction was always electric because each win reinforced the idea that the AE86's spirit could never be outclassed, no matter how much technology advanced. Microstory. Meanwhile, scarcity was beginning to reshape the AE86 identity. What had once been an affordable entry point into performance driving was becoming increasingly rare, as drifting took its toll on available cars and collector interest surged. Prices rose sharply, and the AE86 transitioned from an accessible tool for grassroots drivers into a collectible artifact of car culture. This shift created tension. The very car that represented accessibility was now becoming unattainable for many. Yet in a way, this added to its legend, transforming it into something precious. Reflection Bridge. As the AE86 aged and its market shifted, its influence began to ripple outward into the design and philosophy of new cars. Context Digest. Toyota itself took note of the AE86's lasting appeal when developing the modern 86 and later GR86. While updated with contemporary engineering, these cars were designed to recapture the same principles: lightweight construction, rear-wheel drive balance, and affordability compared to high-performance exotics. In interviews, Toyota's engineers acknowledged the AE86 as their inspiration, underscoring how a 1980s Corolla had managed to guide the company's future. This continuation ensured the AE86's spirit was not locked in the past, but living on in modern form. Microstory. Across car meets worldwide, from California to Europe to Southeast Asia, AE86 gatherings became cultural touchstones. Owners proudly showcased pristine restorations, battle-scarred drift cars, and everything in between. For many, owning an AE86 was not just about the machine, but about belonging to a global family that celebrated creativity, resilience, and driving passion. Strangers could connect instantly over stories of how the car changed their outlook or taught them valuable lessons behind the wheel. It was proof that legends are sustained not only by history, but by community. Microstory. As time passed, the AE86 even began appearing at prestigious classic car shows, a striking reminder of how far it had traveled from its humble beginnings. Surrounded by six-figure exotics, the Toyota still drew attention because its legend was not about exclusivity, but about cultural resonance. People flocked to it not for rarity alone, but for the stories it carried, the nights on mountain passes, the races against all odds, the digital recreations that fueled childhood dreams. It was living proof that authenticity could outshine prestige. The AE86 had now become more than a drifting icon. It was an international symbol of car culture, shaping the way people thought about performance, identity, and community. Its journey, however, was not complete until we understand the long-term impact and lessons it left for both enthusiasts and the automotive industry as a whole. The later years of the Hayabusa story reveal not only how the motorcycle aged, but how it cemented its position as one of the most important two-wheeled machines in history. As the industry evolved, regulations tightened further, and new technologies emerged. The Hayabusa carried a weight few bikes could match. It was the living reminder of a moment when performance knew no boundaries. This enduring status gave it influence far beyond the showroom floor, shaping entire communities and even redefining how motorcycles were perceived. Microstory, the 2008 resurrection. Nearly a decade after its debut, Suzuki unveiled a redesigned Hayabusa. The engine was enlarged to 340c, and refinements in electronics made it smoother, more responsive, and more comfortable for long rides. Yet despite the upgrades, the voluntary top speed agreement remained, meaning the new version couldn't eclipse the original's record. For enthusiasts, this created a paradox. The second-generation Hayabusa was objectively a better motorcycle, but it could never be as legendary as its uncapped predecessor. Microstory. The rider's perspective. Owners of the Hayabusa often describe a unique bond with the machine. It isn't just the speed. It's the confidence the bike inspires. The aerodynamic bodywork keeps it stable at high velocity. The engine delivers effortless thrust at any speed, and the ergonomics allow long-distance comfort. For many riders, the Hayabusa became more than a sport bike. It was a grand touring missile, capable of devouring highways while still thrilling on twisty roads. This dual identity helped it outlast rivals and win loyalty that bordered on devotion. Context Digest. By the 2010s, motorcycle culture had diversified dramatically. Adventure bikes, naked sport machines, and retro-styled models gained popularity, yet the Hayabusa maintained a niche as the benchmark for extreme performance. Its staying power highlighted a deeper truth. While trends shifted, the allure of ultimate speed never disappeared. Even as the market broadened, the Hayabusa held a symbolic place that no other category could dislodge. Microstory, the global brotherhood. Online communities dedicated to the Hayabusa grew into vast networks. Riders from different countries shared tuning tips, stories, and photos, creating an international family united by the bird of prey emblem. Annual meetups, drag racing events, and charity rides reinforced the sense of belonging. For many, owning a Hayabusa wasn't just about personal enjoyment. It was about joining a tribe that celebrated the thrill of riding a machine that once changed the rules. Reflection Bridge. While riders cherished it, regulators and environmental trends were setting the stage for the next challenges. Microstory. The pressure of emissions. As global emissions standards became stricter, performance motorcycles faced mounting hurdles. The Hayabusa's large displacement and raw power drew scrutiny, and by the late 2010s, rumors swirled about its discontinuation. In Europe, stricter regulations made it increasingly difficult to keep the model compliant. For fans, the thought of losing the Hayabusa was almost unthinkable, sparking petitions and campaigns to keep it alive. Microstory, the pause and return. In 2020, Suzuki officially halted production in many markets due to emissions regulations. For a moment, it seemed the Hayabusa had reached the end of its road. Yet just a year later, Suzuki announced a heavily updated third generation. While its top speed was still electronically limited, the new Hayabusa featured advanced electronics, refined aerodynamics, and safety features like traction control and ABS. The message was clear. The Falcon would continue to fly even in a more regulated era. Context Digest. The 2021 relaunch showed how far motorcycle technology had advanced. Rider aids once reserved for race bikes were now standard, and the Hayabusa balanced heritage with modernity. Still, the shadow of the original remained. No matter how advanced the electronics or refined the handling, enthusiasts continued to measure every new version against the groundbreaking 1999 model that defied convention. Microstory, the collector's market. As time passed, first-generation Hayabusas began commanding attention from collectors. Unmodified examples, especially from the inaugural 1999 run, fetched rising prices at auctions. These bikes were recognized not just as machines but as cultural artifacts, tangible links to a time when limits were shattered. For collectors, owning one was like holding a piece of history, a relic from the moment motorcycling crossed into new territory. Microstory. The cultural stamp. The Hayabusa's name has transcended motorcycling. It appears in music, film, and even slang as shorthand for overwhelming speed. Few vehicles achieve this kind of cultural recognition. The Hayabusa stands alongside icons like the Mustang or the Porsche 911 in terms of symbolic power. Its image resonates with people who may never even ride a motorcycle, proving its impact is broader than just two wheels. Reflection Bridge. As we step back to assess the full story, it becomes clear that the Hayabusa is not only about speed, but about what speed represents to humanity. Microstory. The symbol of limits. Every era has its machines that test boundaries. The Concorde in aviation, the Saturn V in space exploration, and in motorcycling, the Hayabusa. These creations don't just achieve technical feats. They force societies to grapple with questions of ambition, safety, and responsibility. The Hayabusa's legacy lies in being that pivot point for motorcycles, the moment when the thrill of possibility met the reality of human fear. Context Digest. Decades later, the Hayabusa still carries that dual legacy. It remains a living model in Suzuki's lineup, yet it also lives as myth, remembered as the motorcycle that forced an entire industry to self-regulate. Riders revere it for its capability. Critics invoke it as a cautionary tale. The tension has never been resolved, and perhaps that's why the Hayabusa endures. It embodies the conflict between what we can do and what we should do. Microstory. A legend that outran time. Though competitors have matched or even surpassed its performance within modern constraints, none have matched its mystique. The Hayabusa was more than numbers. It was a cultural event. Its story bridges generations of riders and continues to inspire debates about speed, freedom, and responsibility. Long after production eventually ceases, the Hayabusa will remain a symbol, etched into the collective memory of enthusiasts worldwide. And so, the tale of the bike they tried to ban concludes not with silence but with resonance, proving that sometimes the most controversial creations are the ones that leave the deepest mark. The journey of the AE86 shows us something remarkable about how legends are made. What began as a simple Corolla variant designed for practicality and economy became one of the most celebrated icons in automotive history because people discovered its hidden depth and chose to elevate it. Enthusiasts, racers, storytellers, and communities transformed it from a car into a symbol. Along the way, it reminded the automotive world that passion and skill can matter more than prestige or power. The AE86's influence is not locked in the past. It continues to ripple forward in modern sports cars that prioritize balance over brute force, in video games that introduce younger generations to its spirit, and in communities that keep its legend alive through gatherings, builds, and stories. Its role in shaping drifting, tuning culture, and even how manufacturers think about performance cannot be overstated. The AE86 lesson is universal. Greatness comes not from specification sheets, but from the experiences a machine creates and the culture it inspires. For those who love cars, the AE86 is proof that humility and authenticity can outlast trends. For Toyota, it remains a benchmark of what a driver's car should feel like. And for the wider culture, it has become a symbol of creativity, rebellion, and connection, transcending borders and generations. As we close this story, it's worth remembering that the AE86 never needed to be the fastest, the rarest, or the most powerful. What it needed was people willing to see beyond its modest exterior and unlock the joy hidden within. That's what turned it into a drift legend and a global icon. Thanks for riding with us on Octane Origins. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.